So, Kristin, thanks so much for being on the podcast with me today. I want to tell our listeners today that this is Kristin's second time on the podcast, but first time actually being recorded. We did this and we had an amazing conversation, and then I went to edit it and realized I couldn't find it. I had not hit the record button. So, Kristin, thanks so much for your time together today. Class, whoever's listening to this, I want to read Kristin's resume first, and this podcast really started in my mind with Kristin going all the way back to when we first talked before she joined the program. We had a great conversation. I said, I want to have a chance to interview her. And so I just want you to read her bio and you just recognize who we have in our class with us. So her title would be, based on this website here, Kristin Leucht. She's a senior consultant for synods of the Southwest and Southern California and Hawaii, and part of synod of the Rocky Mountains. So that's Colorado and Utah. So that's quite a title right there, by the way. So I'm going to read this. The Reverend Kristin Leucht joined the Board of Pensions in 2019 and became a senior church consultant in November of 2021. Prior to joining the board, she served as an executive pastor of it's not Canada,
Kenyatta.
That's a beautiful name too, by the way. La Kenyatta Presbyterian Church in California. In addition to serving over 21 years as associate pastor, Kristin has participated in leadership of the Synod of Southern California and Hawaii and the Presbytery of San Fernando. She's been a member of the Committee on Ministry as well as the Committee on Preparation for Ministry of the Presbytery of San Fernando. Kristin, and this is incredible right here, your education, has a bachelor's degree from the University of California, Davis. I'm a UC grad as well, so we've got that in common. I love the UCs. And a Master of Divinity from what I believe is probably the best seminary in the world, Fuller Theological Seminary. Presbyteries in Kristin's region are located in Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Nebraska, Utah, California, and Hawaii. And in addition to that, you are a spouse to, it sounds like, a wonderful human being.
He is.
So maybe I'll start there by asking you, tell us about your husband, just a little bit.
So my husband is a clinical psychologist. He's a child psychologist, and we live in the Los Angeles area. So he works in the community mental health system in Pasadena with birth to 5 programs. So he does a lot of intervention with kids who are in Head Start programs and in the foster care system.
Oh man, probably what he has seen, especially up there in Los Angeles County. And that's one of the most important, as you know, that's one of the most important parts or periods in a young person's life, that 0 to 5. So that's a huge ministry that he has there as well. So we're in a class on integrity, Kristin, and I thought there's no one better to have this conversation with as we're wrapping up this class. We're talking about integrity than you. You have all this background being a pastor. You're now a consultant to many pastors and many different churches. Your husband does good work. He's what I would call, consider to be in ministry. So when you think about this integrity and leadership, and from your experience, executive pastor, where you are now, how important is integrity in leadership actually in the marketplace or in ministry or wherever it is?
Oh, it's very important. What I've appreciated in this class is sort of the expansive definition of integrity. I think if you'd asked me 6 months ago, what is integrity, I would have been like being honest and truthful. But I really appreciate your definition of the fact that it is congruence between how we are on the inside and how we act, and the consistency with how we respond in a variety of settings. I think if you are a leader, you need to demonstrate positive characteristics. Like, you can't be one person in one setting and a completely different person in another setting. Like, to have integrity means that you are consistent in your behavior, because if you are erratic, people have a hard time following you. They don't know which leader am I going to get today, which boss is going to show up. And I think having integrity with who you are and how you behave is important. I think having integrity in your lifestyle so I did work for a pastor that didn't have a lot of integrity, and he wasn't, well, didn't is probably, he had some measure of lack of integrity. So it wasn't like he was cheating on, stealing money and,
Right.
doing
Right.
anything inappropriate, but there was. So, and as an example, he would get up and talk about the importance of giving and tithing, and how that was just an important Christian discipline, which is absolutely true. But
Mm-hmm.
I saw what he gave, and I knew that that's not what he was living in his own life.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, not everybody in the congregation saw that,
Sure.
but I knew that and knew that, okay, there's a disconnect there, and that he doesn't have integrity with what he says, and how he responds. And I think that's important. People want to follow leaders, whether it be a church leader or a business leader or a boss, however it is, that have integrity. They want to know that
Mhm.
they walk the talk, that they mean what they say. And I think there's some authenticity. Like, pastors struggle with trying to create this perfect persona.
Mhm.
Like, I never yell at my spouse and I am always perfect with my children. I mean, and that's obviously a gross exaggeration, but you want to, there is a tendency to say that we are more spiritual than what we really
Right.
are. And I
Right.
think it's more with a congregation, if you can be more honest and say, yeah, I've had doubts, or yes, these are things that I wrestle with, and no, I'm not perfect. I think that makes it, people want to hear that, because if
Mhm.
there's an expectation in faith that you have to be perfect, nobody lives up to that. And
Mhm.
so I don't want to follow a pastor that says I'm perfect and I get it right all the time, because
Absolutely.
that's not how life is. And I think the same with a leader. I think it would be important to say, I made a mistake. And what I
Yes.
appreciate about my boss now is there's been a time where he got frustrated in the middle of a meeting and perhaps was a bit more emotive than he should have been. And he came back and apologized to us.
Mhm.
And I think, oh my gosh, what a
Wow.
wonderful thing to be able to say, I made a mistake. And we all knew it, but to name it and say, I made this mistake,
Absolutely.
it really felt like I have a tremendous amount of respect for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the pastor who maybe yells at his wife or kids. But the reality is sometimes that does happen, right?
Oh,
A
yeah.
pastor loses the temper, but I appreciate what you're saying. What matters is, can that person then go back afterwards and say, "Hey, I messed up and I'm really sorry for how I handled that situation." And that really makes a difference. So let me ask you this. So it sounds like you have worked for probably leaders from all the different scales, really great leaders and some that maybe aren't so great. When you look at a leader maybe who lacks some integrity, maybe it's not that everybody knows, but some people know, right, about that. And you have leaders like the one that you just mentioned. What does that do for the organization? What does that do for you as a person? What does that do for a team when they're working for a leader that might lack some integrity, and then a leader who really walks the talk and really has that integrity? How is that different for both teams? If that question makes sense.
No, it does. So the easy answer is for my current boss, who has what I would say a lot of integrity and a lot of authenticity. I think those are kind of, it's hand in hand a bit. I think I am more motivated to follow him and more motivated to do well by him, because I have a lot of respect for him. And
Mm,
I know too, I'm also willing to take risks in some ways and make mistakes, because he's already demonstrated to me that he makes mistakes and it's okay to make mistakes. You apologize. And in that particular case, he apologized, but sometimes you can, I think if you play things safe because you're afraid of making a mistake, that's
mhm.
not, the organization doesn't advance in
Mm,
whatever they're advancing. So I just have a lot more respect, and I feel like I work harder and I'm willing to try harder, knowing that he's in
wow.
there doing it. I think with the opposite, for that other particular pastor, it causes you to question, like, okay, I know you're cutting the corner here. So what else do I
Mhm.
not trust about
Mhm.
what you say? Like, I'm only seeing this small window of your total life. And
Mhm.
that's a bigger window than the person sitting in the pew. But what am I missing? Like, you just kind of feel like dis-ease with
Yes.
that person,
Yeah.
and just as like, I don't know that I trust what you're saying,
Hmm.
because not because just because I didn't trust it over there. And so you kind of more generalize and you question a bit more. And I don't think that's very productive if you're questioning your leader, whether it's internally or verbally, out loud. I think that's not productive. We need to be
Absolutely.
willing to follow our leader and go after what they're going after.
Kristin, I really appreciate what you're saying. I think that's good for all of us on the call to hear that when we're putting ourselves in positions, which all of us are, right? We're in a leadership program, we're in a business program. So we're putting ourselves in positions where we're going to be leading. I think that's good for us to hear that if something doesn't match up with what I say and how I act, uh, the people on my team may not tell me, right? They may not say anything about it, but they see it and it could impact the morale of the team, even if I'm trying to be a good boss, but they see this side, right? They see the side to me. Um, in our last, in our original, call when we talked about this, you mentioned something that I have not heard of in years, but it's since we talked, I've mentioned this to several people because it's such a great concept. You talked about the shadow side, right? That most people, I know for me, I will tell you that I have a shadow side. Talk about what the shadow side is, and what do we as leaders and as business people, teachers, all this stuff, what can we do to help maybe improve that or to get rid of it if that's even possible? What do we do with that shadow side? But first, what is it?
So it comes from my Presbyterian tradition, and that's how language we use, but I'm sure other Christian traditions have that same thing. It's the idea that none of us are perfect. And
Mhm.
so there's places in our lives that we keep in the shadows in the sense that it's places where we are, I'm trying not to talk pastor, but the places where we sin, the places where, we repeatedly go to it's our sort of our persona or our actions that we want to keep in the shadows and we don't want to have them exposed. And I think we all have it. Every single one of us are not perfect. And so there's imperfections in who we are and how we act. And so we as Presbyterians talk about that shadow side of needing to acknowledge that all of us have it, needing to depending on what's in there. So if there's some addiction of some sort, to acknowledge that there is that addiction. Now, what do we do to help mitigate that? What do we do to, I know that once you're an alcoholic, you're always an alcoholic. You may not be drinking, but what are you doing to minimize
Mhm.
the effect of that? And some of that comes from talking about it. Some of it comes from very intensive therapies, but it's just recognizing that that's in us. That's a part of us. And I think as leaders, it's important to do your own work to recognize what's in your shadow side,
Mm.
what kind of uh, weaknesses do you have in terms of symptoms? So I have a tendency to, my family calls me Eeyore, and I go to the worst case scenario, and it's just like, I have to sometimes step back and say, okay, how productive is it for me to think through and always have a negative outlook? Can I step back and say, okay, today's going to be a good day, and I don't have to have that it's always going to rain, it's always going to fall apart sort of attitude. But I know that that's a weakness in me. And when I'm not attending to it, then I slip back in it. And I have people in my life. I mean, it takes two teenagers to remind you that you have
That's
a shadow side.
that's
I
right.
mean, thankfully, my children are young adults now, but the people closest to you are the best able to sort of say, this is how you may not be accurately seeing yourself.
That
Does that make sense?
it makes perfect sense, and I have a follow-up question to that. And I appreciate you saying this. I may not be an Eeyore type. I'm pretty positive, but I can be the type who walks into a room and sees everything that needs to be fixed. And so when I bring that home, right, to the kids, and they've been waiting all day for dad to walk through the door and say hi, and immediately I go into, why isn't this done? Why isn't this done? Right? That's and I found, that's probably that's a lighter side to my shadow side. I have darker areas for sure as well, but that one I have found that has caused problems with my children, and I've had to, like you said, there's nothing like teenagers to humble us down. I've had to have those questions, but I know that if I don't fix that over time, just in my household, that will change
Mhm.
the culture of the household. If I'm constantly, oh, here he comes again, here comes dad, everyone hide out in the rooms because he's going to walk in and see something negative. So I appreciate you saying that. How does someone from a leadership position, okay, so this is a two-part question. We talk about all of us have a shadow side. Some people have darker shadow sides than others, right? And they have shadow
Mhm.
sides that could lead to, larger consequences. And maybe what you've seen, Kristin, is what I've seen is oftentimes the more talented someone is, the more charismatic, the more the person on the platform, right? Uh,
Yep.
Sometimes the shadow side is just dark. Does someone need to step out of leadership? And if not, what do they do? What are practical things that someone can do to really help them with that side so they can continue to stay in leadership? Or should they be in leadership in the first place?
Well, it depends on how deep or how dark their shadow side is. So if they are struggling with some sort of addiction, if there is an inappropriate sexual relationship, and I'm talking in the church context, though I would say in the business
In
context
business
as
as
well.
well, absolutely.
Um, if there's serious financial, like if they have a gambling addiction, and
Mhm.
I mean, that's still addiction, but it also has financial implications,
Mhm.
then I would say, yeah, they need to, it's hard to lead and also be attending to that. So
Mm.
do they need to step out of leadership for a season of time to deal with that and become a bit more healthy? I would say yes. If it's, I'm trying to think of something that's not as severe, but if it's something that just needs therapy, or they need to go talk to a coach or a spiritual director or somebody else to help them walk through that, then I think, yeah, they could continue to be in leadership, because we're never not going to have a shadow side. So I
Mhm.
don't want to say, because if we say we're only leaders if we don't have all of those things, then we don't have
Then
any
none of us are
leaders.
leading, right? Yeah. We
Right.
don't have
So
any leaders.
it
Yeah.
it it really does depend on the severity, and to the extent that people around them are saying it's impacting their leading. So with this pastor that was having some integrity issues,
Mhm.
it got to the point with other things that the people around the elder board said it's time for you to retire,
Wow.
because you need to not be leading. And they did
Mhm.
that in the most kind and compassionate way. But yeah, he needed to step out of leadership because of circumstances in his life that needed to be addressed. So,
That leads me to
yeah.
another question, Christian. Uh, so if someone, we all have a shadow side. If someone lacks integrity, how long can a person go? Okay. So maybe there's someone on our in our class or our call, or someone who's watching this who says, man, I kind of struggle with this and I have a lack of integrity. My outside, it doesn't match my inside. How long can a person go realistically with a lack of integrity? With the insides not matching the outsides. Have you seen this before? And how long can a person really get?
Um, I think it all depends on how charismatic your leader. And
Mm,
unfortunately, we get attracted to very charismatic
mhm.
leaders, and you think that sort of the more we elevate them, the harder they fall. So I think about it, how far can they go? Because I can think some people have gotten really, you think about religious leaders that have gotten in
Yeah.
trouble. So pastors have had,
Oh,
and they went
absolutely.
pretty
Right.
far.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I think
Built huge
people,
churches, lots of people, lots of followers, and then one day it all came out, right? The
yeah,
shadow side was revealed.
right. And I think of Mark Driscoll up in
Yeah.
Seattle, all of that. And he had a big shadow side, and it was a fallout. And then eventually it just got worse and he just lost his church.
Mm.
Um, so how far can they go? Um, I would probably change that a little bit and say they
Sure.
need to start working on it now.
Mm.
Like, and
Because
working
it will
on,
be found out, correct?
yes,
It will
yeah,
be found out.
yes, because people will either, that will be something public that blows up,
Hmm.
or people will start losing the desire to follow
Hmm.
or to work for them. I mean, you think about it in the more corporate setting. If people don't want to be on your team, if your team members are quitting or resigning or moving to other departments, that has an impact on you. Um, People, you might not get promoted. So I think it really just depends on the setting, but it is never too late. are never too early to start thinking about it and becoming aware of where there is incongruence in your action and in what you are on the inside. Because I think eventually it will be found out either in a big public display or just gradually over time your leadership is eroded.
And Kristin, you and I have seen this before, and I want to be careful that I'm not speaking from a judgmental perspective. I could go back to my 20s and I could tell stories about my shadow side, reveal a lot of immaturity as well, right? I was leading in my 20s. I was in the military, and I came and I hadn't matured. I shouldn't have been in some leadership positions at that age. But you and I have seen people who have really built something and get to their midlife, right? And then it all comes crashing down. And it's just so sad for everyone involved. It's sad for them. It's sad for the spouse. It's sad for the kids, the family, the church community, if they're a politician, the local community. So I appreciate that, that encouragement that it's going. For any of us on the call, if we have that shadow side and if it's too dark, it's going to be revealed at some point. So we have to take care of it, now.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about the good aspects. What happens? And I'm sure you've seen people who've ended their race, if we call it that, really well, and they've got to the finish line. Tell me what that looks like when someone who has a lifetime of integrity, they have learned how to control the shadow side, they've had discipline and self-control, whatever it is. And so a lifetime of integrity, what does that look like?
So one of my colleagues, or my former colleagues at the church that I served with, he's just getting into just retiring, and he spent his entire career at that church, which for
Wow.
Presbyterians, that's a little unusual.
Yes.
But that's 45 years.
Wow.
And
One church,
he,
45 years. Wow.
yep. And he's somebody that I say has incredible amount of integrity.
Mhm.
He would be the first to tell you if you asked him, people put him on a pedestal all the time because he is a very relational person.
Mhm.
But if you were to ask him about who he is, he would lead with, these are the things that I struggle with. And because he has a counseling background, he's first to
Mhm.
acknowledge this is sort of in an appropriate way.
Right.
I'm not perfect. You want to think that I am, but here is where I am not. And to his retirement party, I mean, he had to announce his retirement a year in advance
Wow.
because that's how beloved he is in the
Wow.
church community. And over those
Mhm.
45 years, even in the local community just gave him a volunteer of the year sort of
Wow.
award. So the community of itself recognized that this is a man with incredible ministry and incredible integrity because he loves people and he just acknowledges that he's a broken person. So then you feel like, okay, I don't have to be perfect in front of him. And it's okay for me to tell him, here's where I am struggling. And it's not a judgmental place, but it's a place of healing and a place of just restoration. So that's an example of somebody who's really lived well with integrity. I haven't had enough business experience to point to those leaders, but I would say it's not just limited to the church world. There's business
No.
leaders too.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
100% right. There's in the service class that I'm teaching right now, we're talking about a gentleman. He's kind of a lightning rod in the political world, so I don't bring his name up a lot, but I started studying him, and he's been the CEO of his business. His name's Charles Koch. You've probably heard of him before. He's
Mm-hmm.
one of the Koch brothers, but he's been the CEO of Koch Industries for now 50 something years. His name elicits a lot of reactions from people, but I've studied him because I wanted to see. And what I found was regardless of whether people believe about his political beliefs, the reason why he's been able to build a $115 billion company, in the books that are written about him, what they talk about is he is a man of deep principles and deep integrity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I've seen this in the business world, I've seen it in the church world as well, how that works. So as we kind of wrap up, and Kristin, I could talk to you all day about this. And as I've said before, in other classes, I can't wait for you to come back and talk about this, but some other subjects. So I hope we get to do another couple of these before you graduate from our program. And one thing I want to say too, before I ask you to wrap us up today, one of the things I really appreciate about you is you don't have to be in this program. I remember when we first met and you came in, it was 30 seconds in, and I said, there's no need to interview, of course you can be, but you don't need to be. I look up to you
Oh,
And
thank you.
no, I'm dead serious. You coming into our program and saying, and I remember at the beginning say, hey, there's just a few skills that I want to, that I want to hone a little bit. And I'm looking at your resume saying you don't need this, but I think you're an example to all of us about this process of continuous learning. So thank you for being a part of the Point Loma community. As you wrap up this class today, I'm going to ask for a couple of things from your pastor perspective. Can you give us some words of encouragement as we seek to go out and be in the marketplace and live lives of integrity? And then would you pray for us as we end this class, today as well?
Oh, absolutely. So, pastors, we all hold up our hands. I mean, that we do, it's just as a way of saying, but so you don't have to, but that's, when we,
I'm going to
so,
join you on this.
okay. So may my classmates know their role in the world and know that they have things to offer the world that's unique to them. So may they tap into that and lead well. And may they do the work of knowing their shadow side and know who they are. Because now it's my Presbyterianism, they are uniquely created and uniquely positioned. And so they have things to offer the world that nobody else can. So may they do their academic work and their internship work, whatever is needed to become the leaders that they were created and designed to be.
Ah,
That's mine.
amazing. Thank you. We all needed to hear this today. Let's come up with just 2 questions. It's our final week, so we
Okay.
won't give them too many. Well, if we have 3, then that's fine too. Based on what we just talked about, what are 2 to 3 questions that we could ask as we end with reflection? And here's one thing I'm finding out. This semester, because I'm working on dissertations, I've not been able to get in there and comment, but I've been reading a lot of what people are writing. This is a very reflective class, and I'm very proud of what I've been seeing, in the comments. So what are 2 to 3 things that we could ask for our classmates to kind of reflect on?
Well, I think it would be important for them to reflect on the idea of shadow side and have what do they, and maybe not to pour it out on the post, but have they spent some time thinking about what is in their shadow side, and what are they doing to deal with that? Are they in regular conversation with people that know them well? Are they in therapy? Are they just at the beginning part of that and just even journaling and even discovering what might be in there?
That's a great, okay. So question number 1, class, would be, to the extent you feel comfortable, share, and you don't even have to share your shadow side, but have you considered it? And do you know what your shadow side is? If you want to talk about it, fine. That's great to reflect. And then the second part of that question is, what are you doing you had a good word for that, Kristin, not to get rid of, but to manage.
Yes, and reflect. Yeah, I don't remember the word I used either. That's the disadvantage of age is you forget like the words you said. But I do think you do have to reflect on it and process it and begin to like, it's never going to go away, but
Yes.
how do you mitigate the impact of that?
Absolutely. Okay, so that's the part 2 of the question. Do you know your shadow side? If you want to write about that, you can, to the extent you feel comfortable. But the question is, because we all have it, so what are you doing to help mitigate it, to help manage that shadow side? Okay, so that's our first question. What could be another question we would ask from today?
I think it's really important to, and different traditions have different words of accountability partners. Who is speaking honestly into your life? Because I could self-deceive and I could say, oh yeah, there's 3 things that I struggle with.
Yes.
But if I were to go ask my husband or I go ask my kids and they're
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, you struggle with that. But really what is bigger is this other thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it's human nature to want to think that we are better than we are.
Mm-hmm.
And so who is, I'm trying not to use church words, but who is helping you honestly reflect on who you are and how you're acting? Because they're going to see the disconnect between how you are on the inside or how you
Absolutely.
are and how you are projecting to be.
I, you know,
So that might be a question.
That's really good. I read somewhere that oftentimes we think we know. I think it was a statement somebody was making to a group of leaders. They said, we think we know our weaknesses. Our people know our weaknesses, right? They can absolutely see everything we can't see. So that's the second question. Maybe name 1 to 2 people in your life that you believe, and I'll just say the word because I can't think of a better word for you, that hold you accountable. And if you have a better word for that, then you can say that, in your reflection. But who's there to hold you accountable and help, point out your blind sides? Okay.
Yep.
And then, let's get one more final question for this semester. And what could that question be?
It would be, I don't know if this is a good enough question, but it'd be interesting for them to reflect on leaders that they have followed.
I love it. I love it.
And to see, maybe an example of somebody that they have followed that had a sense of integrity from where they sat, knowing that they might have had a limited view of their life, and maybe somebody who hasn't had it, or just because I think you can learn a lot from watching other people and seeing how their integrity or lack thereof impacts their leadership.
Okay, so that's it. So our final question: name someone who who exhibited strong integrity throughout their life, and the positive results, the positive consequences, and somebody that maybe you've seen in life that exhibited, what would we call that, poor integrity? Because both of them probably had integrity, but it just the shadow side, again, that shadow side came out. So somebody who, well, that's probably lacking integrity because they showed a public face, but there was a private side that so someone who lacked integrity, and what were the consequences of that right there? Class, this has been amazing. Reverend Kristin Leucht, it's been an honor to have you on this final podcast. Thank you for closing us out well. I'm so grateful that you've been in this program. Class, this has been great. You've been awesome this semester. Thank you for your reflection. Any final words for us before we go today?
No, I love what I'm learning, so I hope that everybody else is loving what they're learning, and I appreciate that this is not just a program that's teaching us spreadsheets and all that mechanics of leadership. It's really looking at the character of that. So I really hope that the class and the program participants are able to integrate both of those things, because those are very needed for leadership. So that would be my final thought.
That's a perfect final thought. Class, have a wonderful week. Reach out if you need me, and it's been a joy. I'll see you here, there, or on the other side. Take care.